Thank you, Shaks. We're here in the entrance hallway of the United Nations. As you can see, a bustling hallway. And it's not surprising that it's such a bustling hallway because this is the first UN Water Conference in almost 50 years. So let's check out what people are here for, but most especially what they're expecting. Hello, who's here with me?
Hi, this is Shomi.
And Shomi, where are you from?
I am from Bangladesh.
I'm from Italy.
Hello, my name is Pacha Kanchay, indigenous Yanacona from Colombia.
It's in the lowlands of the Netherlands.
New York.
A South African.
What are your hopes for this conference?
I am hoping to see some serious commitments for the water action agenda.
The important core message is that we must treat water and the water cycle as a global public good that needs all of our collective effort.
What I really hope is that we adopt the vision of a drinkable river as our compass for our daily actions and for our shared actions.
So, Elisa, I'm really curious to know what brings you here specifically to the UN Water Conference.
So since I make part of a World Youth Organization pursuing an advisory opinion from International Court of Justice, we are really hoping that what is going to happen to this conference will complement what we're pursuing, which is climate justice in general and intergenerational equity.
It is beyond the dollars and cents because without water you can't live.
All the future generation they are coming, we need to bring to all of them a precious water, a good planet, and we are here speaking about that.
So, loads of different people, very exciting to see. So I'd say, back to you, Shaks. So, good afternoon, hello, and welcome everybody, I would say. Welcome to this session on the UN 2023 Water Conference about how we go from voluntary commitments to impact. My name is Haji Yacoubi, I'm a former UN Youth Representative, and yes, I was the lady just now on the screen that was nodding very profoundly to people answering my question. As you can see, I always love to hear good insights from people, and that is also why I am extremely delighted to be your moderator for this session today. Now, just to make sure that everyone can hear me, also to our audience online, I see that everybody has a headset. Go to channel 2 to be able to hear the sound because we're doing a silent session here. And to all the people watching online, you can access the interpretation rather simply just by going to the streaming and clicking on the interpretation tag on there. And then you can select the language that you want to listen into. So now that hopefully everyone can hear me, I'll say welcome once again. Now, just now in that introduction video, I was present at the very first day of the UN 2023 Water Conference. And I was there to ask people specifically about their hopes, their expectations, and their wishes for the conference. Now, some time has passed since then. I was told 152 days to be exact. And now we're here to see which of those commitments have been fulfilled, but even more so, how we can move from those voluntary commitments to actual hard impact. And that is ever so necessary. I mean, if there's ever a room of people I've been in that I don't have to tell that, then it's probably here. But you guys know that, right? It's why we do the work that we do, to make sure that we prevent devastating effects for human lives and human dignity. I mean, we've all seen in the past year how many floods and droughts and forest fires in Greece that we have seen in Sweden here recently with the floods. And we know that that is only a warning of what's to come if we don't act in time. So what we need is action. And now, the UN Water Conference was such a call for action. It was organized last March, and it had a lot of people coming over from all over the world to make different commitments and gather to make impact for water action. Different stakeholders, but it was co-organized by the Kingdom of the Netherlands and the Republic of Tajikistan, together with UN-Water and UN DESA, and it succeeded in uniting a lot of people from all over the world for water action. So now that we're here, I think it's only fitting that we plunge into this post-conference insight about how we can get that actual impact from all the commitments that have been made. So I'm very happy to see that you've all chosen to be here. And now that I've told you a little bit about this session and about myself, I would actually also very much like to get to know you a little better. So we have devised a little game to do that. In a little bit to our online audience, you can also join in because we have a Mentimeter to assist you with that. And then the people here live in Stockholm can also see your answers in the back. But it's a rather straightforward game. All I will do in a little bit is say a statement out loud. And if the statement applies to you, then you may stand up. And if it doesn't apply to you, you remain seated. So if you agree with the statement, you stand. And if you disagree, you remain seated. A quick first statement just to see if everyone understands the rules of the game is, I understand the rules of this game. So if that statement applies to you, you may stand. And if it doesn't, you may remain seated. You know, now I don't know if everyone gets it, because I saw some confused faces in the audience that were like, what's happening? Everyone's standing, so I'll stand as well. But thank you so much. I think everyone stood up at some point. That's very good. Okay, now we're going to go on to some other questions via the Mentimeter. And for that, I have Evita here to assist me, so very happy to have her with me. The very first statement that I want to ask everybody here in this room, but also the people online, so please join in with us, is I have attended the UN 2023 Water Conference either in person or online. So if that applies to you, you may stand up and you may remain seated if you weren't there. Okay, we have quite an interesting distribution. I think a majority has been there, but some people haven't been there as well. Maybe we have some people walking around with a microphone. I'm just curious maybe to hear if somebody wants to share what their reflections back were on the conference. Everyone that's seated down, I have photographic memory, so I know exactly who stood up and who didn't. Over there, I see somebody with the blazer and the red shirt underneath it. Would you like to share how you found the conference, what your reflections are looking back on it?
Hi, yes, my name is Sarah Breslin and I work for UN-Water. So yes, I had to be there.
You had to be there. It wasn't voluntary. How do you look back on the conference having been there?
Sorry?
How do you look back at the conference having been there?
Well, it was an excellent show of how we have really managed to elevate the topic of water in the UN system, and being able to see so many participants from really cross-sectoral and also a lot of youth present there was really, really fantastic. And now we are really excited for the next steps.
Cool, thank you so much. Thanks. And it's almost as though you're giving me the perfect bridge to the next statement, because you speak about the next steps, right? I also mentioned earlier that this session is all about, moving from voluntary commitments to hard impact. There were a lot of commitments made during the UN Water Conference, over 800 in the Water Action Agenda. And that is what the next statement is about, and that is, I submitted a commitment to the Water Action Agenda. So if that statement applies to you, please stand up. And if it doesn't, then remain seated. Ooh, interesting. Oh, I really want to get you over there with the green suit, but that is also a little task that I'm giving to the people with the microphone. Maybe the people in the row can help and assist them by passing the microphone on. Now we're going to keep everyone in suspense. What is the commitment and how is it going with the implementation of it?
Thank you. We committed ourselves to write a chapter on water and food in the Water Action Agenda. We're still working on it.
Okay.
And we also established a working group on water and food, which Mark Smith will talk about. So, work in progress.
Okay, but that's cool. Thank you so much also for sharing. It was kort en krachtig, how we say in Dutch. I love that. Very short and snappy and good, succinct. Can I ask you to stand again, because I did miss some of you guys standing up. Okay, I see somebody over here. Can we get the microphone there? If you made a commitment in what you did. Oh, luckily.
So I drafted the Sustainable Mountain Development. So we're working to include mountains in global agendas, specifically integrating this discussion in a global context, but also how we can integrate it into the UNFCCC context.
Okay, very cool. Thank you so much, the UNFCCC. So that's also, I think, a good example of how we can bring water into other fields and how we can make that nexus even better and even more, right? Climate and water, food and water was mentioned just now as well. So that's good to see that you guys are also thinking about like crossing bridges between different fields, so to say. I see that the people online, some people did, 12 people, yes. Some people no, but there are also some people that are still planning to, possibly during Stockholm. I always like to see that. Please join the group, join the cult, I would say. No, we very much would love you to join in because it's very much needed. Going on to the next question. Now, before we go there, or not before we go there, I just want to say this question in particular, think about it for a little bit because I will pose this same question to you at the very end of this session because obviously we will talk today about how we can keep the momentum going after the UN Water Conference, but also how we can, we're going to talk with commitment makers in a little bit as well on the panel to see, you know, how everything's going for them, what challenges they are facing, what's going really well, and how we can accelerate the actions made in the Water Action Agenda. But because of that, we wanted to know a little bit more about how optimistic you all are about the follow-up of the UN Water Conference. This next question is a sort of a poll. I actually also want to ask everyone in the room to get their phones out now, because you can then also vote on how optimistic you are. And I think we can go to the next slide. Thanks, Evita, for bearing with me. You can go to the next slide and please let us know via the dragging line. You can drag it either to the left where you say that you strongly disagree to the statement, or to the right to say that you strongly agree. And the statement is, I am optimistic about the follow-up process of the UN 2023 Water Conference. Now, I see some answers coming in. We're slowly squeezing ourselves to the right, but we're quite neutrally, I would say, I'm not going to say anything because it keeps on moving. So I'm going to wait until you guys fill it out. In the meantime, while you fill it out, I am curious though to hear, you know, which people are moving a little bit more to the right side of the half of the line over there, and who's on the left side, leaning a bit more towards disagreeing. So if you lean a little bit more to agree, I will ask you to stand up, and if you stay seated, that means that you lean a little bit more to disagree with the statement. So will everybody that agrees with this statement please stand up, and the people that disagree a little bit more remain seated. Okay. I am going to be so awful to the people walking with the microphones, but I would actually maybe like to get an insight there from, you know what, I will walk to you. Maybe that's easier, because this is on my side, but I would actually love to hear from you. No, you can all remain standing up if you want. It's a good stretch for our legs during this session either way. But I see that you lean a little bit more towards agreeing, so you're a little optimistic. Yes, yes, it was you.
Hi, yes. No, I'm incredibly optimistic because I've been working with youth engagement in water since Marseille in 2012. And actually, for the first time, we're seeing it's incredibly integrated across the whole board. And yeah, the young generation is essentially the next policy makers, right? Decision makers. So it's good to finally see it on the board, and that's what fuels my optimism.
Right. And specifically with regards to the UN Water Conference, how do you reflect on that? Is that what drives that optimism even more about young people being ready to be the next decision makers?
I think so, yes. It definitely is a sign for it, and also great to see young people hosting a session. So thanks.
Well, I will take that. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for sharing. I also see people that remain seated, and now that I'm here after all, hi. I don't want to jump scare you, I'm so sorry. I see that you did choose to remain seated, so you're not as optimistic, I take it, with the follow-up. Would you like to share why?
Well, I would like to say I'm neutral, so I'm 3. I have worked for the UN for many years, now I'm with SIWI, but I'm very familiar with the bureaucratic inertia in the UN system, so that's why.
And that bureaucratic, slow process.
Slow grinding, but there are many other actors, the youth, private sector, etc. So I hope there will be some action soon.
And you mentioned them specifically because are those the sort of groups that do make you a little more optimistic? Is that what you have your hope vested in?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, so you don't think it's going to work through the multilateral system, so to say?
Well, that's also important, but I don't think that's the only actor.
Right. No, I thank you so much. I think that will make for an interesting session in a little bit, and I will get back in screen view for our online audience. But I thank you all for sharing that, by the way, and thank you all for standing up and sitting down. I think that will be very interesting because specifically today is all about listening to different stakeholders and listening how they envision that action moving forward. So thank you so much for sharing. That was the very last question. And now I think that would be an amazing introduction to our very first panel for today. Just before we start, if you have any questions during the panel, please just raise your hand. As you see, we have microphones on the set, so we can just walk into the audience. Also to our online viewers, please just send your questions into the Zoom chat. We have somebody checking them out. Floris is here on the first seat, and he's checking out all your questions. So if there's any question you want to pose to one of our panelists, then please do so. And then without further ado, I want to take a closer look at how we can keep the momentum of the UN Water Conference going. And to do that, I am delighted to introduce and call forward, first off, Mr. Sultan Rahimzoda, who is the Special Envoy of the President to the Republic of Tajikistan, to the Water and Climate Coalition leaders. Please give him a big round of applause, a very warm welcome to Sultan Rahimzoda. Welcome. You may take around this table. Then we also have Mrs. Meike van Ginneken, who is the Special Envoy for International Water Affairs for the Kingdom of the Netherlands. So give her a big round of applause as well. Meike van Ginneken. We have Mr. Johannes Koolman, who is the UN Water Vice Chair. So for Johannes Koolman as well, a big round of applause. And now that your hands are still warm, I will go to last but not least, we have Ingrid Timbu, who is the COP28 Senior Water Specialist. So Ingrid Timbu, very warm welcome to you as well. You may also, at the very last table, you don't have to speak directly into the microphones. They're quite sound sensitive, so even from wherever you're standing, they will pick up your sound. But a very warm welcome to all of you. I'm very happy to have you here. And maybe I was talking earlier about how we can keep that momentum going. But before we look forward into the future, I actually want to take a step back. And maybe I can do so by going to you first, Meike, because you know, there has been a lot of thought and detail that went into the preparatory process of the UN 2023 Water Conference. How do you look back specifically at that preparatory process?
Yeah, thanks very much. When we and our brothers and sisters from Tajikistan and the UN started with preparing for the conference, we really had three terms in mind. One was inclusive, second was cross-sectoral, and the third one was action-oriented. So you ask me to grade ourselves against what we plan to do. First, inclusive. I think we've already heard it from some people here in the audience, and I've picked it up everywhere this week. I think we give ourselves an A on inclusive because it was really, truly an inclusive conference. Not a traditional UN conference with only governments, but many groups. Not going to list them all because I will not be inclusive and forgot a few. But I think we really did very well on inclusivity, and I think that means that we now have a lot of ownership for the action agenda. Yeah. Second thing, cross-sectoral. I think there we still have some homework to do. We have many people from the water sector. We see more people from different other sectors, other themes, etc. But we still need to do better in reaching out to food people, agricultural people, to climate, to cities, to energy, and to ministries of finance and heads of states. So yes, we're getting there, but I think we all recognize also here in Stockholm we have some way to go. And then the third one was action orientation. And you already asked, how do people think the actions are being implemented and the commitments are being implemented? But if you go back to the conference, the fact that we have a water action agenda with over 800 commitments, true commitments that are action oriented, that have a real life impact, I think is something we should celebrate. I already give a preview, I'm on the optimistic side in terms of implementation, but we'll come back to that. Yeah. But I think we really achieved being a very action-oriented conference, and I think that's a great success. So I'm very happy.
Yeah, and thank you so much for sharing. So I hear it indeed. It's about the inclusivity, which, yeah, you said you would give an A indeed. Yeah. UN has even said that, if I'm not mistaken by quoting it in that way, that the UN Water Conference is a blueprint now for conferences to come in terms of stakeholder participation and inclusion. So, I mean, that's not a light compliment indeed. And the action-orientedness indeed comes back. We'll talk about that as well. The cross-sectoral point, that's also an interesting one, that there's still some homework to do there. Well, just now we saw some people that are from either the food world or climate and are working on that nexus. So if there's anybody that wants to shed some light on that or share their perspectives on how that can be better, or maybe just has a question in general, just raise your hand and we'll get to you during this panel. But thank you so much for that, Maaike. That being said, I would also like to go to Sultan. I mean, the Netherlands and Tajikistan as brothers and sisters, as you so nicely said, Maaike, working together. What were your main highlights coming out of the conference?
Thank you first for providing us an opportunity to a bit exercise before this session. It's really helpful.
Right?
And about the conference, I think the preparatory process was quite interesting process. Sound?
Oh, there's no... Is it not working? No. Okay.
Working?
Yeah. Oh, sir, you have to put on your headphone. It's that's why it doesn't do amplification. But if you put this on and go to channel 2, you should be able to hear all the speakers. Sorry, please continue.
Thank you. Yeah, it was quite a complicated process, but very interesting and exciting. And I have to say, even capacity building process. So we learned a lot from the process, from each other. First of all, from our Dutch friends, from my brother Hank, and all our Dutch friends. And then what we learned from the process and from the conference itself, that water can connect cultures, countries, continents, and these two countries, Tajikistan and the Netherlands, with absolutely different nature, with different economic development. So it was not so easy at the beginning of the process, because always you have in water upstream countries and the downstream countries with absolutely different interests. And it was complicated, but we did it. So that is power of water that could connect people, continents, culture, and interest. The second moment, which was highlighted by Secretary General of the UN during the conference itself, that we have to look in water beyond the water itself. So water is everywhere. What is source of our energy? What is source of our food? It's matter of the environment sustainability. So when we are talking about water, we have to think about the other sectors too. The cross-sectorality was one of our principles in our preparatory process for the conference itself. And the third one, about the actions, which is really needed. Again, I mentioned that 1 year ago, before the conference, when we are talking about the importance of the increasing of our efforts twice, during the conference we were talking about increasing quadruple, 4 times, but the UN-Water now just issued a report that we need to increase our action 6 times to achieve SDG 6 by 2030. So this is basically informal part which we'll learn from this process, and the formal part is water action agenda and the follow-up actions. I think everybody's know about this, and I have to highlight also maybe one more moment, that after the conference we have more champion countries, champion partners joined us. Senegal joined Tajikistan and the Netherlands about the new UNJ resolution. So CB is providing this platform. UNF CCC Secretariat intended to include water in the agenda. UAE invited Tajikistan and the Netherlands to co-lead the water processes, and the World Bank also included water among the top 5 priorities of the water World Bank agenda. That's really great. We create the momentum. We have to keep it and to build the new impact to have more success. Thank you.
But that's amazing. Thank you so much. I once heard somebody said we should break out of our bubble in a way. That's also what I'm hearing you say. Go to the other sort of sectors and work together. But it's also about increasing your bubble. It's also getting more people into your bubble. And I like how you said that we have more water champions ongoing. So thank you so much for sharing that. Hey, I think what's also always very important, just to set a clear scene for the basis of this conversation with each other, is that we have a clear view of all that has happened. And maybe Johannes, if I can give you that honorable task. I mentioned in the introduction that it's been 152 days now since the conference took place. A lot has happened ever since. Could you possibly talk us through what has happened in the follow-up of the UN Water Conference?
I can give you, I don't know if I have the clear vision here, but I can give you a couple of aspects. The first thing I experienced after the conferences, when all the water folks went out of the UN building, I went to our coffee place where we get our coffees, and the guy where I get my coffee every day said, "Thank God that water conference because the coffee machines broke down, the lines were so there was so much engagement around.
That was also what happened, right?
That our people in the cafeteria said, "Thank God it's over." So that is the beginning of the follow-up after the conference. But I think what we have seen after the conference is three things. Basically, one is, of course, the start of the water action agenda, and this is the conference had two mandates: to produce a summary document and to produce voluntary commitments. And the water action agenda is the voluntary commitments that come from the conference. So it's really the main outcome of the conference, and we will certainly talk about that later in more detail. And then I think there are two more things that also come from the Interactive Dialogue 5, which are the cohesion and the coherence within the UN system. And I don't know, do you remember the Zoom times when somebody had birthday in a Zoom meeting and everybody tried to sing happy birthday? That doesn't work, it's catastrophic. And a little bit what we are trying to do in the UN is like that. And or if you have a choir and you have 100 top star singers, but the 100 singers all have a different trainer, a conductor, and then they come together and shall perform, it doesn't work. So you need this joint training, this joint understanding, and the joint
cohesion with each other.
Yeah. So to do that, the UN Water now has agreed to develop one UN Water strategy.
Right.
That should be presented next year, and we have already started. We have decided that in the UN Water meeting, so that is starting now, that's ongoing, and I think we can, through that way, provide this cohesion in the UN system, this coherence.
That's a good one, first of all, to bring that together, the strategy.
Yeah, and the last point I will make, and then I'll shut up for a while.
No, no worries.
Is the IAD 5 has also shown that the same symptom applies a little bit to the member states, because we have in all the different UN agencies 193 or 187 or whatnot member states, and they all tell us something. And IAD 5 has called for an intergovernmental platform to streamline and agree and take up those major game changers that were discussed in the conference.
Right, yeah.
And this is now being developed in New York.
Well,
there's a process on a water resolution that was discussed in the last weeks under the leadership again of the Netherlands, Tajikistan and Senegal. And I think we're coming to an end of this discussion, and it's like when you agree on this, when you agree with your children on what we want to do a Sunday outing, all the children say, yeah, we want to have that.
Yeah.
But then when you want to decide, do we go to the zoo or to the ice cream shop, then it gets difficult.
Right.
And if you have 193 children, imagine the
that
Sunday.
do that.
so
I love how you sort of infantilize the I think it really helps. It makes it also, it simplifies it, right? The same thing with the happy birthday song. When you try to do, I have tried to do it in a Zoom, and I can tell you somebody is at to you and the other one's just starting with happy birthday. So
there are three things that are happening.
But very clear,
is it fast enough? No, for my taste personally, but it's there. So I'm also on the hope.
No, but it's good that you mention it, because then it might be interesting to look with each other how we can get into that acceleration. But that's very clear. I take the points from you. Thank you so much also for explaining that. Ingrid,
yes,
I have a very easy, simple task for you. Don't worry. It's a big thing that has been mentioned for years, and everyone here in the room is mentioning it as well. I was in a talk show yesterday, and they were mentioning it at the start, at the plenary. How do we bring these different worlds and sectors together, right? We're water people here, most of us. I think we are water experts here in the room. But it's all about bringing together water and climate, water and food, and all working together more in that respect. And I mean, the Water Conference has been quite historic in bringing these commitments together. But now, how can we bring the commitments and the outcomes of the Water Conference more central in a place like COP21, for example, which is a primary climate place and should actually be perhaps more intertwined with all these different fields. So no pressure, but I assume you have a clear-cut answer for us on how we can solve that.
Well, thankfully, I have a good team that I'm working with, so it's not just on me, thank God. So, hi everybody, my name is Ingrid Timbo. I'm from the COP28 presidency team, the partnerships and programming team, and so what my job is to basically bring forward what is the global water community doing to address the global climate crisis this year at COP28 in Dubai. Part of that, we were very clear, the UAE was very clear from the beginning. They were well aware, they attended the UN Water Conference in March, so they have been very aware of this and really wanted to think about what are the ways to make sure that we are capturing all of the good work that has already happened. When I came on board, I said, absolutely, we are not redoing anything. You all have spent so much time and energy on putting together this conference already, and so let's look at the Water Action Agenda and find some kind of key commitments that came out of that, and let's bring them into the conference as well as bringing, as Sultan mentioned, Tajikistan and the Netherlands on board as water champion countries for COP this year. And I just want to be very clear, of course, this is another process and another plate, COP is a moment, but what comes out of COP are national climate commitments that really feed action over time. And so not only do I want to bring the Water Action Agenda to the COP itself, where we can do kind of these showcasing moments, but also think about the integration of that. And this year is a really good year because it's the global stocktake, and countries have to start now working on their commitments for 2025, and so we can bring those solutions now to help support that.
And the global stocktake, that is where we take together all the commitments and we see
so it's looking at the national climate commitments that have been made under the Paris Agreement and how well we have done to achieve those. Spoiler alert, not so good. There's progress that has been made, but there's a lot more that we need to do. And so bringing the positivity and showcasing the solutions that are coming from the water sector to support both mitigation and adaptation goals, I think, is something that we can really be proud of and showcase and make sure that it's more integrated in the next round of national climate commitments.
But that's interesting because if I'm not mistaken, maybe I am, but there's not such a thing for water, right, specifically, where there are, national...
No. There's no broad... water...
global stocktake on where we stand, but also mandatory.
There is the process under SDG 6, of course, that's going on. But not... water doesn't have its own convention, so there's no kind of process like that.
Yeah, that's a good point. Mike, I see you looking. I don't know, did you want to add to that?
Yeah, I think it's fine that we don't have a specific water home where we all hide and sit together. I actually think it's great that we integrate into the climate agenda and the climate adaptation agenda. Because this idea, if we don't have something for ourselves, a stocktake for ourselves, nothing's going to happen. We just need to get that out of our head. Because then we be a little stocktake somewhere and there will be nobody in our room, just us. We need to make those bridges. And it's fine that we fit into the COP process and that we fit into the Food System Summit process and that we fit into global health. Just that's really a mindset that we need to change. And then once in a while we are happy to come together as a water family because I love it.
To re-energize.
But then we also go to all these other commitments, and it's much stronger if we can get into NDCs, for instance, than actually do another set of water plans for each country.
Separate in its own side. Sultan, I see you. Perhaps Sultan, I also saw you not.
Yeah, I agree with Mike. I think that's important. That mainstreaming is the main motivation for the UN water strategy. So I'm totally with you on that. But also the water problems that we have already, where people are dying and moving and being discriminated. Yes, it's partially climate change, but the most part of it is bad planning, corruption, bad economic systems. So it's not climate related, all this stuff. And we should not forget that, because we need to address a couple of cultural, economic, and there comes the economy of the Commission for a New Economy of Water into the play.
Yeah.
So we need to look at the problems that are
much broader indeed.
Between society, economy, environment, and where water is the connector of that. So let's not forget that not everything is climate.
Yeah, and I hear you mentioning indeed the Global Commission on the Economics of Water. There will be a session on that tomorrow as well. So to anyone who's interested, do join. It's at 2 p.m. In A2. Sultan, just want to go to you briefly. I saw you nodding.
Absolutely agree, basically, with Meike and Johannes in terms, I mean, that we have to basically integrate these kind of things, especially, I mean, when we are talking about the cross-sectorality for water processes. So it was the idea that we have to look into the water sector from the other angles, from the other sectors too. Yeah. The same, I think, that when we were talking about the climate issues, we have to take into account the water processes too. That's why I mean that, because water and climate is
super interlinked.
So so much interconnected. Yeah. And if you will be talking only about the climate, just that out
like
of water issue, so that will be complicated, because in any way the adaptation, mitigation, so those programs basically will include the water actions inside. Yeah. That's why it's important, but at the same time there's importance for having the special water process within the UN system to consolidate our efforts and to coordinate our actions.
Yeah, and make it more coherent. Thank you so much. I'm looking, are there any questions from the room? If you don't have a question, I do have one for you, because I'm actually curious, because we're having an entire conversation here, right, about getting more people in and how we can work together more cross-sectorally. I just want to know, are there people in the room, and I won't drag you forward, don't worry, but can people stand up if they either come from the climate or food world, just so that we can get an insight of who is also perhaps from that world? Okay, there are some people. So if you come from the climate or food world, now, forgive me for lying, but maybe the people that stand, there's somebody all the way at the top in the red blouse. You were one of the first ones to stand.
Eva.
Oh, that's Eva. Sorry, I recognize you now. And maybe there's somebody here, we can go second there as well. But I am just curious to hear, coming from a different sector, how do you think that we can better make that interlinkage? Because perhaps those are some insights that we can take forth with us.
Thank you very much. Sorry, I just thought I'd stand up, so I'm very in the back. My name is Eva Schreuder, I work for the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. It's the new head of the water team, and actually this position I had before was deputy head of our climate team, and also being a negotiator for the Netherlands and the EU in the UNFCCC process. So actually I'm pretty encouraged to see already this week how much is happening on integration of the climate challenges and what we do on water. Yeah. So that to say as a first, and furthermore completely agree also with the speakers in the panel that we need to bring water to the climate space. And I think for me personally, to keep it personal, I think this COP is a unique opportunity to further strengthen that. Yeah. And let us all be, again to quote Henk, be water ambassadors and bring water to the COP in the thematic days, in the events on finance, in the events on food, and perhaps also in a negotiated outcome on climate. So I'm encouraged and look forward to working with you.
And we may applaud for that indeed. I love that. Thank you so much, Eva. And I like that. That's a good one, that we should all indeed be water ambassadors. Now, there was somebody here as well. If you would like to perhaps also stand up and share, because I'm also curious to hear some more insights on how we can better make that interlinkage.
Yeah, thank you, Karen, from KfW Development Bank. We have a path dependency, so to say, to look into water projects and to finance infrastructure there. And we're moving much more forward towards climate resilience, in particular in cities. And this means embracing more a holistic perspective. And for the water sector, that means that we don't start with sector analysis. We start with a risk analysis. And we see what climate risks do we have in a certain city, in a certain area. And then we analyze, and then we see, like, how can the water sector, how can we, with the infrastructure investments, contribute to manage this risk. So it's a very different perspective that we apply. Yeah. And this is, I think, how we link water and and climate and proceed from a much more holistic perspective. But water remains important, is very, very important, and we see a lot of entry points for climate resilience, in particular in cities in that regard.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. Thank you so much. Is there anybody that would like to add anything perhaps to what has been said just now? If not, then I think we got two very succinct and nice ways in which we can look at the interconnection between water and climate. To our panel, I just want to say thank you so much. Can we get a big round of applause for them? Thank you so much for everything. If you want to, you may bring your headset if you want, because then you can listen in to the rest. I mean, that would be quite nice, right? Thank you so much. I think we've got a good insight on the things that are happening, the preparatory process of the UN Water Conference, and also on how we can keep the momentum going moving forward. Now, I mentioned earlier, because at the beginning, Maaike, she mentioned the inclusivity element is prime to that preparatory process, the cross-sectorality, and also the action orientation. And specifically, when we talked about inclusivity, I mentioned that after the UN 2023 Water Conference, the UN had said that the blueprint for inclusive stakeholder participation had been set out. No pressure there, but I do think that is utterly important. I mean, coming myself from a background of youth participation, I think you guys would probably also know that how often it happens that participation within these sort of stakeholder discussions are not inclusive or people are excluded. So that is definitely so important, and it is also what motivated us for this next panel, because we wanted to invite a number of stakeholders with different perspectives, with different from different regions, different groups, different sectors, to hear what new commitments they have launched in the follow-up of the UN 2023 Water Conference. So here to discuss how we can move forward from voluntary commitments to actual impact, I am thrilled to welcome, first of all, Mrs. Lisette Kroon, board member International Affairs at the Association of Dutch Water Authorities and the president of the Blue Deal program. Give her a big round of applause. Lisette, welcome. Please do stand wherever you'd like. Then we have Mr. Mark Smith, Director General Business Strategy and Delivery at the International Water Management Institute. A big round of applause for Mark as well. Welcome. Then Mr. Romeo Bertolini, who is the Deputy Director of Country Engagement for the NDC Partnership. Romeo, where are you? Big round of applause for you as well. Welcome. And then we have Elisa Vaillancourt, who is the Youth Project Manager at the International Secretariat for Water of the Butterfly Effect Coalition. A big round of applause too. And last but definitely not least, I am thrilled to welcome Rochelle Diver, who is the UN Environmental Treaties Coordinator at the International Indian Treaty Council. A big round of applause for Rochelle as well, who's making her way forward. Now, I'm an optimistic person, so I think it should fit with all five of you here. But I even think if somebody stands in the middle, that they would still be audible with the microphones. I just think that over here might be a little tight, but I think we're going to make this absolutely work. Lisette, can I start with you? I just mentioned the Blue Deal. That was the very, very first commitment that got into the water agenda, water action agenda. Not gonna lie, that's quite cool. So I was just curious if you could tell us a little bit more about it and how also, the implementation process is going so far.
Yeah, the first action was actually we doubled our efforts because the Blue Deal is already more than 3 years underway. And we doubled the efforts. That meant that two ministries, Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Infrastructure and Water, together with the 21 water authorities, we have a separate layer, government layer for water in the Netherlands. The 21 water authorities, they doubled their efforts in order to achieve the SDG 6, 20 million people access to healthy water, clean water.
Great.
So that was the first point on the agenda. And you said, how did we do it? Well, first of all, there were the means. That was they are supported by the ministries. Mm-hmm. And the Dutch water authorities, they join with people, so capacity. Okay. And what we do is we bring and we collect from the partnerships. We have like 17 partnerships all over the world. And first it was more like bringing our expertise, bringing our knowledge, and we learned what the Dutch government layer and the Dutch governance could mean there. Yeah. But more and more it became a mutual situation. So we learn from countries for drought.
Yeah.
Because we see climate adaptation is not only happening in the southern part of the world, it's everywhere.
Everywhere, right?
So
yeah.
it benefits both sides.
To look at it in that way. And I mean, you do get me curious, how is the implementation going so far?
Well, the effort was really good, and we see it's also part of good, being a good government layer, because we give our employees the possibility to go abroad, not only work on their own assets, but also go abroad and learn from what's happening there and bring their knowledge abroad. So we see there's a lot of interest from our workers. But we have to make sure that we keep it on the agenda. Because what we cannot do at this moment is slow down and take things for granted. It needs to keep
absolutely
oiled.
Yeah, I mean, we just heard Sultan Rahim Zoda mention, right, that at this point we need to six-fold our efforts to make sure that we are still in line with SDG 6. So absolutely, we can't sit still there. Thank you also for sharing that so much. Now, by the way, if anyone has a question, just holler, guys. So you can raise your hand and we'll get to you with the microphone as soon as we can. So please do that. Also to our online audience, please submit it, because then we'll make sure to post them to the panelists. That being said, Mark, I would really like to go to you next. The previous panel we had, it really ended about how we can work on that cross-sectorality, right? And you are in a way also working on that, because you have launched an initiative during the UN 2023 Water Conference, which has everything to do with water and food. Now, as we know, of course, water is key to food security. You know, without water, there's no food, and without food, there is no life in essence. So I'm really curious to hear from you. Can you tell us more about this working group on water and food, and specifically about what some of the challenges and successes are that you guys are facing?
Sure. You just said that everyone knows that water is key to food security.
The
truth is, not everyone knows
that. That is a good way to start. Well, maybe that is indeed.
And I'm from an institution, the International Water Management Institute, that sits inside a larger family of institutions, CGIR, which is an agricultural collection of agricultural institutions. So we indeed are very often trying to make the case that water is key to food security.
That's a good
And sometimes minds don't meet. I'll come back to that. Or they don't meet in the way that they should. And that's one of the drivers behind indeed this working group. So, but as that institution, facing that dilemma or that challenge, we were very happy to join a group of 20 organizations that have put forward this commitment on forming this global group on water and food. And that combines, indeed, institutions, partnerships that focus on food, that focus on water, that focus on climate and resilience, from the multilateral system, from the private sector, from research and knowledge institutions as well. The purpose of this group is really to drive a rethink, jointly between the water and the food communities on the role of water in food systems, and the contributions, therefore, that water can make to transforming food systems, which in the food world is the headline banner ambition that they have. But also highlighting that there's urgency. We need to be acting with urgency on these processes of transformation, and we need to identify and catalyze actions, and I think that speaks very much to what we were all focused on in the New York conference. So actions that can build solutions pathways for bringing this kind of integration to go forward. So the working group has a sort of a mission tagline, which is to make sure water is pivotal in the redesign of our food systems.
And just if I can ask you right there, because that in a way baffles me, right? I mean, obviously I went on here and I said, well, of course, water, you know, without water there's no food, and without food there's no life. But then you're really saying that that is something that needs to be rethought, that people are not taking that right away. What do you think is causing, the fact that water is not as central in, for example, the food sector? What is behind it, do you think?
Yeah, it's a very interesting question. And I think there's some, if I can say, there's some evidence for this mismatch in thinking.
Oh,
right?
do tell.
So if we look at the Food System Summit, which took place a year ago, 2022, and then the second
in July. Somebody here remembers it very well.
Second convening was July of this year, right? In the outcomes from the Food System Summit, water is very weakly represented in those outcomes. And likewise, in the Water Action Agenda, food, despite the fact that agriculture and food systems are responsible for withdrawal of, we all in this room, I'm sure, know the figure of 70% of water withdrawals are related to agriculture and irrigation. So despite that, in the Water Action Agenda, only some, I think the number is 18% of the commitments to the Water Action Agenda are addressing agriculture and food. So why is that? Why is there this mismatch?
Yeah.
And my own view of that is that we have mismatched mental models for how we look at the world.
Mental models?
Yeah. So in the food world and in the agriculture world, water's an input. It's an input in a long list of other inputs, fertilizer and seeds and the right seeds and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
And so, if you're standing from the point of view of an agricultural institution or someone that thinks about agriculture, you're thinking, well, we've got a bit less water or a bit more water, and it can be a bit risky, but we'll be okay alongside getting some fertilizer.
Yeah.
Whereas when we look at that from the point of view of people that think about water, we look at, and I think this is correct, right? We look
the right way.
We look at the way water relates to food systems as an existential risk.
Right.
Take out the water parts of the system, and the system collapses, or it's much weaker. And there's a problem in getting these two mental models to talk to each other.
Yeah.
And that's what this working group, in part, will
is
be
working
trying
on.
to convene people to bring minds together, to have joint thinking and joint action planning about how do we implement.
Wow, I love that. I love that so much that I, sneaked up on your table to steal a pen. So we need to go from water, shift away from it seeing it just as an input to an existential threat to food systems. I was locking eye contact with you guys throughout, but you were so... Oh, it's your boss. Oh, no. I was actually curious because you did mention, apart from the fact that he's your boss, that's actually irrelevant to what I was going to ask, because you were very sharp on remembering the exact date of the food summit. It was like, somebody shaking awake from a nightmare being like, July last year was the second convention. I was just curious. You're here as well at the Water Week. If we can get a microphone to you, could you maybe share a little bit more on... how you reflect on the food system summit, for example, and what is blocking that interlinkage with water?
I totally agree. Oh, sorry, I hear myself now.
No worries.
I totally agree with what has been said. I wasn't on the high-level panel yesterday, and I basically said more or less the same. I shared the same message.
Yeah.
So I think there is truly a disalignment with how we see things, and the fact that the figure is actually 12%, is not 18. So it's even lower.
Correcting the boss.
No, it's not correcting. I started. No, I'm not correcting. It's just to show that the figure is even lower, so that also strengthens even more what has been said.
Yeah,
that's what I wanted to do.
Absolutely, no. Thank you so much. I'm sorry, that's a silly joke.
So that's also strengthening the misalignment.
But thank you so much.
We'll speak afterwards, Kit.
No, please blame me. I can take all the blame. I don't want to be the causer of this, but I am very curious. I saw you nodding as well. Were you at the Food Summit, Assistant by any chance?
Yes, and we work with indigenous people. So we try to bring the indigenous people's perspective. And I think I agree. I was trained as a water management person the first years of my career, and then I tried to move more into a rights approach.
Yeah.
Because I think something we do, yes, we look at water as an input, but more as a commodity. And I think we also need to move from that shift.
Wow.
But I won't say more because Rochelle will say more.
Wow. Why am I swear it's not planned that I pick out people that have their faith vested in the panel. I just think that means we have a formidable panel, that people have their faith. Thank you so much. I will take your microphone and bring it back to Evita and Floris on the side. Thank you so much. And thank you so much for sharing. Again, if you guys have any questions or just insights to share, please do raise your hand and we'll be back to you. But thank you to the two of you so much for sharing that. And thank you, Mark, also for shedding some more light on that. Now, we go from the water-food nexus to the water-climate nexus. And that brings me to you, Romeo. I'm very curious to hear, in the same way that water and food are inextricably linked, water and climate are definitely also inextricably linked. You're from the NDC partnership, and the NDC partnership has committed to, link climate and water better in the NDCs. Can you tell us a little bit more about that commitment and, how you see it?
Yeah, sure. And thank you very much for this event. And actually, I had quite some notes and thoughts already put down. But the first round was doing it all already. And and I think what Ingrid said here was basically having this integrated into the summits, into the NDCs, the nationally determined contributions, and making those points, because climate as such is nothing, right? I mean, you have to have a reference point, you have to have a basis for this, and this is extremely important to think this and to bring this community, which is so wonderful and active, into the climate world, which is sometimes a bit tedious, very political, of course, the north-south kind of, divide, and the Annex 1, Annex 2 countries, as they call it, is like a really painful process sometimes, because it's all but practical and all but pragmatic, and we really need this pragmatism, I think. And one of the most important things that are out there, I think, and Maike said it yesterday during the reception at the embassy, was to bring in the ministries of finance, the ministries of planning, making sure that this is part and parcel of the more holistic kind of national development plan. And this is what we as the NDC partnership, in the meantime, starting in 2015-16, do with about 90 developing countries and with about 120 international partners to try to integrate this and to work on water and this water climate nexus by breaking down the NDCs, making them part and parcel of an investment plan that considers technical assistance, that considers, of course, also the infrastructure. And we have about 80 countries, I think, at the least, where water plays quite a role. That is a very important part of the work which we are doing, reaching out to the countries and making sure that these kind of planning exercises are done. We do this not as the secretariat that we are part of, but also with these 120 partners, and always on the request of the counterpart government and the developing country government.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a very good one, and I like, indeed, how you said that, it happens on all terrains. And what I liked yesterday about the speech from Maike is that I think she also said that there's so much knowledge out there. And I remember that you said perhaps there is a finance minister there that is making the exact right decisions. And I think that's also pertinent to the work that you guys do, that you take all the knowledge that's out there and bring it together and make sure that we drive action in that way. Now, earlier Mark shed some light on some of the things that are obstacles in how we look at water, specifically within the food sector. But when you look at climate, what are some of the obstacles that you see that we should really think about, collectively and address that prevent perhaps the interlinkage being made between water and climate?
Yeah, I think the siloed thinking is still a little bit of an issue, and the turfy approach sometimes also from the environmental ministries is sometimes there. What we see is a strong correlation between kind of a leadership, senior heads of state, prime minister kind of leadership, making sure that climate is addressed across the board with strong governance mechanisms that help ministries working together on the cabinet table, making sure that the budgeting and the planning is doing coherently and complementarily, and also approach the international community jointly. And then on the other hand, we see a lot of stepping on each other's feet from the international community and competing for kind of the absorption of the countries. And that is really confusing sometimes, especially in the climate field. I was in Namibia the other day, and we saw a lot of effort from the Ministry of Environment, Forestry and Tourism when it comes to breaking down the NDC into something tangible in 9 sectors. Water was obviously one of them.
Yeah.
But not necessarily the water ministry, more from the higher, the political level, had the ownership. It was, of course, involved in the planning on the country, on the operational level, on the working level. It was like done perfectly.
Yeah.
But how do you say it? The lift, the acceleration to the top of the government. Yeah. That is something that sometimes lacks, and that is a challenge too.
That's interesting, actually, and thank you for shedding light on that. I think that gives a whole new insight into something that needs to be addressed. And very briefly, do you think it's like bad will? Do you think it's that people have so much at their heads that they don't do that enough? What do you think causes the fact that we don't get to catalyze it into this more high form of leadership?
Because climate often is framed as being, counterproductive to growth. It's counterproductive to the system. the well-being, to employment, and so forth. And I think that's something, of course, if you're a politician and you look into your next kind of election cycle, you're not going to deal with the problems that may hit you in 20 years. You're going to see, youth unemployment is 20–25%. People are going to the streets rallying for more growth, for less corruption, for whatever,
I get it,
but not necessarily for that topic.
Yeah, I don't like that that's happening, but I hear what you're saying. We're almost coming back to like the basic fundamental short-sightedness of humanity. That's a big issue indeed, and it's manifesting itself in this way.
This is what's happening when you have a crisis.
Yeah.
And what do? You go back to you, just you, and you forget about the broader perspective
and about others. And I do think there are some groups, that, and of course it's not as black as white as these groups do it well, and they don't do it. But I think, and maybe that brings me to you, Elisa, because I think. Inherently, what is linked to being young, of course, is the fact that you see that long-term play out, and I think, there are so many young people around the world, also young WASH activists and young water activists, young climate activists that, are pinpointing this short-sightedness. And you can only get that perspective if you include people into this process, and if you have like a counterforce to remind us of, how we should look at it differently. And then we're talking about including CSO, including youth, including indigenous people. So that does back the question, Elisa, when we look at the UN conference, at the very beginning there was a consensus that it could only be successful if we had an inclusive stakeholder participation process within there. I'm just curious to hear from you. How are you looking back at that preparatory process then? Did it fulfill your expectations?
Yeah, I think I'm going to be a little bit more critical maybe than the first panel was. I think there are two things that I would like to say on this. I think the first thing, and some may say that this was something that was out of the control of many for this conference, but I think we need to reflect on where we are having these discussions, because for many people, it was impossible to even enter the country in which this conference was taking place, and I think that is a very, very important issue that we need to address. When we're talking about issues of such importance, and we realize that even half of the world can't even enter the country in which these discussions are taking place. I think that's an issue that we need to think about.
With the UN being in New York and the visas too.
I think we do recognize that significant efforts were made to face that issue, with a lot of things being virtual and a lot of things that have been put in place to ensure inclusion. But I think that is still something we need to think about. And the second point on inclusion that I want to speak on is that I think we need to move from inclusion to significant and transformative inclusion. I think we are ready to now make that step. It's no longer enough to simply include and check the box, but we need to make sure that we are including stakeholders in the whole process. And that for me, that is significant inclusion. And I have to say that there are success stories in this conference. There were examples of successful involvement of diverse stakeholders. Can it be better, and can it be more, and can we learn from this and keep improving for upcoming global processes? To that, I would still have to say yes.
Absolutely. And I love how you say this, that we need to go from inclusion to actual significant, real inclusion. So you said that is all about involving people in all processes. Can you maybe give an example of how that would be done correctly? Because I hear what you're saying. Maybe an example would help to illustrate it, also in the lead up and probably post conference.
Yeah, maybe I'll use this opportunity to bring a point that I really wanted to bring today.
Please do.
And I think one thing that we've heard a lot this week, and that was a huge buzz during the UN conference, was the nomination of the UN Water Envoy. And we've heard this say a lot, but I think this UN Water Envoy first needs to be nominated very quickly, because this is a very, very important issue that hasn't yet been addressed. But this can be a one-way one-woman or a one-man show. I think this position, this opportunity that we have to have water ambassadors at the highest level, it needs to be something that is representative of the voices of young people, representative of the voices of indigenous peoples, of women, of those that are really living the water issues every single day in their communities. And this, for me, that would be an example of significant inclusion in the follow-up to this conference.
Right, definitely. And thank you so much for sharing that. I'm just checking. I saw two people not so profoundly when you were talking, Elisa. I don't know if you guys had the same experience or if you wanted to add something to it. Either one of you two. There is some place to get the microphone to, but perhaps people can help bring it to them. It is making its way. Suspense.
I don't know if we actually have anything to contribute to it, but we are junior rapporteurs. And I would just say that whenever we hear people talking about youth inclusion in more terms than just being a number or a person on the panel to speak about the future, we just really like that.
Okay, cool.
And you want to hear about that more.
So. You're youth rapporteurs. Could you maybe share what is it that you do?
We are covering most of the sessions, writing reports about women inclusion, youth participation in the discussions. And in the end, we will write some article to describe, showcase how the whole conference went for the past 1 week.
Ah, cool. And maybe, is there anything you would really like to ask, maybe to add to the article? The chance to Elise, it could be to either one of the other panelists, but maybe with regards to that youth inclusion that perhaps that you mentioned that you'd like to hear more about?
God, you're putting us on the spot.
I am very much so, but I have faith in you guys. You can do it. I'm just kidding. Oh, there is a question.
Yes, I think we left New York a few months ago.
Yeah.
And for us, we would like to know how far we have been with the commitment and the action that people said they would like to do regarding the water questions in general. How are we monitoring and following the commitment that all the institutions made there?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I'm also thinking who could answer that best. Perhaps... Evita is also looking at, or is, we have examples here. Oh, Lisette, perhaps, because you have made a commitment and
I've made
you are working.
One commitment.
Oh, there is, sorry, Lisette. No, please go ahead, and then in the meantime, we bring the microphone to
We had the first commitment that was double the effort, and we made a second commitment, and that we saw that there was a gap between what we were doing already. We brought the governance, we brought the expertise, and you had the investments. And there's a gap between maintenance, between nature-based solutions, between education.
But the progress is...
And we wanted, because it connects to what you were saying, make an effort together with the financial system. So we took an investment bank, especially the Islamic Development Bank, that they joined us in this effort.
Wow.
And even this morning we had
a call?
And follow-up on this agreement, and it looks like it's going to be very prospective about 2 pilots in Palestine and in Burkina Faso, that we try to close this gap, and that means that they will bring in extra money, supporting money. So you can see that it doesn't come just like we have an action and then we just rest. So we have to keep on working. The process is not letting go, and the process, especially with the climate crisis, is if we don't make sure that we are part of a lot of the solution in agricultural system, in food production, in the energy crisis, then we will lose it, because water in itself, it's not, like we call, sexy enough, but it combines, it's not for...
It's everywhere.
Yeah, it's
what they
in
say,
the middle of the
it's
SDGs.
also what everyone always says,
so,
water
but
is
it takes every one of us, especially the young people, to make sure that these actions will continue and that there will be added more actions as well.
Okay, thank you so much, Lisette, also for sharing that. But that is indeed quite, it also shows that you made the commitment, you were at the water conference, and then in the follow-up to it, you've been able, and I mean, I can only say congratulations on getting that, I guess, capital injection because of the fact that you were, you know, you made the commitment, and right now in the follow-up after the conference, you've made these links with everyone. Before we go to somebody there, I want to go to Rochelle first, because I think what we're discussing here before, right, about having an inclusive preparatory process, and I'm very happy that Elisa shared her own critical thinking about it. I want to go to you as well from like an indigenous perspective. How are you looking back at everything? And then maybe afterwards we can get to the audience, but please do share, yeah.
And if you'll allow me first, I'm not sure people are familiar with what's under my name, so I just wanted to introduce myself so you know who these entities are. But also as Indigenous peoples, it's really important that we say, you know, who we're representing as well, who are we speaking on behalf of. Yeah. I'm an Anishinaabe woman. We are Indigenous peoples in the US and Canada around the Great Lakes region. So we are water bearers, and it's central to our livelihood. The International Indian Treaty Council is an organization of Indigenous peoples working for the rights of Indigenous peoples, and that was founded in 1974 and worked on all 30 years of the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. I think that's really relevant to the conversation, also that you know, I didn't know what to stand up or sit down. Who's in the food sector, who's in climate change sector. We are all of these things. We're frontline defenders of climate change. We, of course, have our own food systems. And I said we're water bearers. So it's for that reason, we really want to have a larger seat at the table. And for another, you know, word that's kind of floating around here too that we don't really identify with, which is stakeholders, because we're rights holders. And we deserve a seat at the table for that reason. All the people on the ground that are impacted every day, we're saying that. So, you know, I hope to see that happening. We did see a greater, as time went on, it became more inclusive of Indigenous peoples. At first, for example, we were kind of lumped together with this kind of undefined or non-consistent term of local communities, which is, you know, not acceptable to us, of course. 30 years it took to get the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, and we hope everyone will take that in as a core document when they're thinking about engaging with Indigenous peoples, speaking about, or, you know, if our rights are on the table, you know, we hope to be at that table as well. Yeah. So we didn't really feel we were so included as the water conference was coming up. There were a lot of barriers, such as ECOSOC, needing ECOSOC status. Right. Luckily, IATC was able to be that catalyst, but we also were only given a certain number of badges. So how do we decide who's allowed to have a say? Right. And that's not something we want to do.
Yeah, and sorry, maybe for the people that aren't too familiar, the ECOSOC, of course, is the accreditation that you need to enter the conference. So that was one barrier there. Please continue.
Yes, thank you. Sorry, I try not to go
into
don't worry.
That's soup. What I'm here for. No, don't worry.
So, you know, we decided to take it into our own hands. You can't wait to always get what you want. So we just took it upon ourselves to organize the International Indigenous Peoples Pre-Summit before the Water Conference in New York. We met for 2 full days. We represented, the group represented Indigenous peoples from all 7 socioeconomic regions of the world. And we spent 2 days really talking about what our priorities are. So also the things that, you know, we had the hard conversations, the conversations we were hoping to have inside, as my sister said, about commodification, privatization. Right. For me, where I come from, abundance of water is not the issue, but our water is not clean anymore. It's filled with pesticides, persistent organic pollutants, mercury. Those conversations weren't really taking place. The privatization that displaces people, you know, so we did that, but we ended with what are the solutions? Indigenous peoples hold the solutions, our traditional knowledge hold the solutions, and then we had a set of recommendations for the water conference that we went in as well. But I will say, out of all of that representation in that room, only 2 people were on the agenda in the actual water conference, and one was only a moderator. So we had a very limited voice inside, and we didn't even really see it represented in the side events.
So there is a way to go. There is definitely a way to go. I do want to applaud you, though, because I do think, and of course, it's also very clear what you say, right? There's a lot to do. For example, very specific thing, the accreditation, how does that work? How can we get people in? You know, earlier was mentioned the UN system, and how can you make sure that that works to be inclusive? But I do want to applaud you, because when you walked in, Rochelle, you said, I'll flow like water. I think it's the Bruce Lee quote, right? Where they say, be formless, shapeless like water. I think that's definitely what you guys did, and you tried to, you know, make it work, had the pre-summit all together, and I really want to applaud you for that. So thank you for sharing as well. We can definitely applaud for that, yes. Thank you so much. In the meantime, Evita, I know you're there with somebody that can tell us a little bit more about, you know, the action acceleration from the question here from the youth rapporteurs on, you know, the commitments that have been made.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'm Federico Properzi. I'm the Chief Technical Advisor of UN-Water. So we work very closely with the colleagues in the UN Secretariat on the Water Action Agenda. So my colleague Sarah here is actually part of the team that will actually be part of the monitoring and follow-up of the commitments.
That's great.
First of all, I would like to say this body of 800 plus 32 commitments, voluntary commitments, it's public, it's online. So I think this is extremely important because for the first time in our sector we have this transparency across the whole sector. We had, of course, we have platforms for commitments in, let's say, parts of the sector, but this is the first time that the Water Action Agenda really brings everything together. It unifies us. The first time we started in New York looking at the commitments and spotlighting, highlighting key ones was actually last month at the special event, the SDG 6 Water Action Agenda special event. It was a whole day event where we really brought some of the, you know, first analysis on stage, and so there. Now the colleagues at the UN Secretariat, they will be starting further deeper analysis of the commitments, and the first step is actually to fill the gaps, because if you open and browse through the commitment, you will see many lack some key information. So the first step is to fill the gap. Then
key information in the commitments that they made, or how do you mean key information that is missing?
Like some, not all fields. When in the submission form, not all fields were filled by all voluntary commitments.
To make sure it's all complete. Yeah.
So the first step is to actually fill the gaps, and then to understand also what is progress, what is happening there.
Yeah.
Now, I was just talking with a few colleagues this week. It's been great for the exchanges. There are ideas on also how to use, for example, AI tools to actually do this much faster. And see and actually get then to the real essence of what we need, which is about we really need to showcase success. We need to start a peer learning process.
And how, and also see from each other, right? If some of these commitments, you know, they're and it's also, I think, what is being done here by the people. But definitely, I think it's great to see that you guys are so extensively monitoring that and, you know, filling in these gaps, seeing how you can go further and, you know, showcasing key examples. Thank you so much. I also do like what you said about, you know, it's out there publicly. And earlier we heard Eva mention what Henk has been telling all of us. We should all be water ambassadors, and also people outside of the water world, definitely, mostly, especially. But I think there's a role there as well, right? For us to hold each other accountable and to see all the work that we're doing, trying to make that as best as we can, but also to, you know, encourage others to do it. Now, I saw a hand from you, Elise. Please do.
To add on that question, because I think it's a really, really important question. I think when we're talking about the position of civil society towards the outcomes of the conference, something I think that we would like to build upon is the fact that this conference was non-binding. So that means that accountability is a question that we need to ask following such a conference. And recently, the Butterfly Effect Coalition addressed a letter to the Secretary General of the UN, which was signed by over 130 organizations, from over 47 countries, mentioning that the adoption of the UN General Assembly resolution must establish regular intergovernmental meetings on water that must result in a political agreement that must serve as a way to keep each other accountable. And one thing that we're really pushing for is that we must find a home for water within the UN. A home as well, talking about inclusivity, a home that will be inclusive of the voices of everyone that is affected by these issues, but a place where really, yeah, we could keep each other accountable for the commitments made.
Right, yeah, definitely.
Not binding activities, because all of us, a lot of the people here, we all agreed to some kind of action.
Right.
And we are binded to that kind of action. So I disagree with you if you say it's non-binding, but I do agree if we say we have to keep giving it more attention on the UN level as well, and make it inclusive as well. So everybody has also this responsibility to keep the persons, to keep the organizations that made this action agenda, to keep them accountable.
Definitely.
We all have this task as well as water ambassadors, as Frank said. So please,
definitely, thank you.
Be part of this as well.
Romeo, you also wanted to step in there?
I think I should have mentioned actually also the support of the Kingdom of the Netherlands that went our way in order to make sure that we have exactly this water, food, climate nexus actually implemented in the work of the NDC partnership, which is anyway a collective work. And there are 4 points that are very relevant here. One is the integration of water into the long-term strategies on climate goals and the NDC enhancement, the review of the NDCs, which is due in 2025 again. We have a mainstreaming of the approach into the public financial management systems as one of the targets, and then we have the project preparation and basically the mainstreaming of climate into project preparations, part of that, and last not least also the knowledge exchange between our stakeholders and making sure that those that are a bit ahead and those that are a bit behind with these kind of integrated thinking are coming together in regional events at COP.
And support, and sometimes you're one, sometimes you're the other, sometimes you have the one rule. But thank you, I think that is
creates,
definitely...
it's very nice to see that dynamic, right? It creates competition in a way, it creates harmony, but also a little bit of
friction,
a dynamic.
Okay, that's cool. That's also interesting to hear.
Family feeling.
I love that. That keeps on coming back, right? We heard the brother and sister. Now we have the family feeling, but I like that, and I think that's essential. Rocha, I do want to come back to you because we're here and we're talking about these voluntary commitments that have been made and how we can turn them into actual impact. And I hear Lisette, for example, she mentioned we have to hold each other accountable, and a commitment made is also responsibility to yourself that you're going to follow through with that. We hear Elise as well that says, well, they need to be binding. Those are two sides, I think, of that you're weighing out. How do you make sure that you don't have a diluted version, because you have to find consensus, and how can we take the champions of water action forward? But I want to hear from you. This is all about moving forward from here. How would you say that, what would we need to do to make sure that we keep the momentum going in your perspective?
Well, we've got our declaration, and I encourage everyone to find that online. Very easy, iitc.org. We'll talk about all the water activities that took place in New York. But I want to go back to something that was said here, that there's a gap between civil society and indigenous peoples, and the people that are there making the decisions, the ministers, the treaty negotiators. We don't have a lot of opportunities to engage, and I think that good faith put forward to have meaningful dialogue intercessionally instead of just when we have these meetings. I think that's a great way to make these commitments live, to show that these commitments are long term. We're playing the long game here. None of these solutions are going to be quick. So to keep the momentum going, I say, in addition to the voluntary commitments that are made as individuals, of course indigenous peoples are always thinking collective, but let's bring that a step further. How do we bridge the gap from the ground to the very top? And let's find a way to do that and continue dialogue in that way.
And do it collectively, why not? I mean, let's bring that in as well, right? And in a way it's being done, and it can be done even more. But thank you so much for shedding light on that. Mark, now I can't keep this from you, but there's a rumor ongoing about you. I've heard from some people that you are a brilliant mastermind synthesizer. I don't know if you would agree with that or not, but that is literally what people are saying to you, about you, I should say. Therefore, I actually wanted to ask you, a lot of things have been shared so far, a lot of good insights, things we should take along, things that we maybe should change, maybe that we should do more of. But to everyone that is here in the room and to the people that are watching online, and it doesn't have to be a summary of what is being said, but I am curious from you, after everything that has been shared so far, what would you say is the most important takeaway that people should take from this session and bring back home to the work that they do?
You know, on the very final afternoon of the UN conference in New York, everyone was drifting out of the gates into the streets in Manhattan, and we were all going, what did we just do, right? And I bumped into someone there, and he said, and we had that conversation, and he said, I'm not sure either, but we have momentum. We talked about water inside the General Assembly Hall, etc. And we have momentum, and now it's up to us to take that momentum and see it through. Now, doing that, I don't think is as simple as signing up to the Water Action Agenda with your commitment of X, Y, Z.
Yeah.
And I think some of the things that we've just heard about accountability are really important. And there's different mechanisms, there's different ways of working on accountability.
Yeah.
But I do think we need to be thinking about that, continuing to build that momentum, looking for what are mechanisms for accountability, what are mechanisms, therefore, for strengthening the institutions. We're working on strengthening the UN institutions. That's a big focus of the conference and what we've been talking about today.
Yeah.
But we also have to be strengthening the institutions around water beyond the UN, not least so that collectively we can work across sectors, but also so we have more pull and not just, which is one of the challenges that we have in working across sectors. We also need pull for the other sectors.
Yeah. Thank you.
So let's look at that wider.
Thank you so much. I think that's a brilliant one to also end on. We have momentum, and we should definitely keep on using that to bring the message. Can I ask everybody to give a big round of applause to our panel? Thank you all so much for doing that. Thank you so much. You may go back to your seats if you'd like. And thank you, Mark. You did live up to my expectations that I had when I heard all the little rumors about your synthesization qualities. Thank you. Now, if you recall, at the very beginning, we asked all of you a question. And that is whether you were optimistic or perhaps less so than you about the follow-up and the actions surrounding the UN 2023 Water Conference. We just talked about making promises and following up on them, so I will do that because I promised you that we will ask that question again after everything that has been shared, that our speakers have shared about what is going on. I want to ask you that question again. Have you changed your position? Are you perhaps more optimistic after having heard what has happened? Somebody definitely is. Starting out with a 5, are you less so? Please do fill it out again. Also to our online audience, keep on doing that. We really appreciate that. And I can see that we are already definitely scoring way more on the right side. So, I shouldn't jinx it. Let me just knock that off. I don't think that's how you say it in English, but you guys get what I'm doing. But I do think that we are on a higher score than we started out with. Evita, do you recall the exact score that we started with? I think it was like 3.1. Thank you. Sir, you are sharp. You're compensating for my my lack of that sharpness. But thank you. It is definitely better. Can I see who in this room voted higher than they started with at the beginning of that session? Will you please stand up? Okay, there's somebody here. Over there, please stand up. Okay, definitely some people. Oh, you were on the pessimistic side, you said at the very start. No, you were neutral, sorry. But now I'm curious to hear, what was it during this session that made you a little more, made you leave a little more optimistic than you started with? I'm really curious.
I think there was a lot of energy in the room. Everybody seems to be very enthusiastic, and I think that's a very good sign. And then I heard about all the commitments that have been made, and then even UN-Water monitoring everything that's happening. So I think that's very good. Wow. So I'm quite optimistic now.
That's really good. And I do take 2 lessons from them. It works to showcase commitments and it works to showcase monitoring. So that is something that we can probably take away with us. Maybe one more person. I saw somebody all the way at the top. I don't know if there's somebody with a microphone that can get us there because I'm out of breath. But there was a lady with a laptop. She was standing up in the back, but I'm checking to see where she is now. Ooh, can the people stand up again when they voted higher than they did at first? Oh, there you are, yeah, with the white blouse. I see you now, you stood up. The one that's looking at the person behind them, over there. The line that you're in. Yeah, sorry, thank you.
Hi, everybody. I actually voted sort of like in the middle, and now I felt very energized after hearing all the all the panelists, especially from the youth perspective, because I didn't know that there were a lot of youth involvement during the conference. I heard rumor because I was not there, but now I hear that there were a lot of activity that is happening in that process as well. Yeah. So I'm very energized, and I also see a lot of connections between water and climate, water and food, and also considering the indigenous point of view, and also allowing them to participate in this process right now. Yeah. So I think I'm more energized and
because of
looking forward to us.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for sharing it. Guys, may I ask you for a big round of applause for our speakers, for yourselves, for the organizers, the technical team here as well, helping, assisting from CV. Thank you all so much. Time flies when you're learning a lot of new things and getting insights. I just want to thank you all so much once again for your action here, your involvement, your engagement. And I will say, I won't say goodbye, but I will say until we meet again at some other place. Thank you so much.